Okay. Okay, I think it's working. So hello and welcome to this new episode of our 10 Minutes With interview series. Today I have the honor of talking to Peter Mackay, current Scottish Makar, among many other activities, as you'll discover if you don't know him already. I'm just going to introduce Peter going to try to introduce Peter without taking up the whole of our 10 minutes together. So forgive me, Peter, but it's going to be a little sketchy. So Dr. Peter Mackay is a poet who was named Scottish Makar in December 2024, but he's also a broadcaster, journalist, senior lecturer in literature at St Andrews University, soon to be a professor of English at the same university. And before that, Peter also worked at Queen's University Belfast and Trinity College in Dublin. Originally from the Isle of Lewis, Peter is an expert on Scottish and Irish literature from 1760 onwards, and especially Scottish Gaelic literature. He's written two monographs, one published in 2021, The Strange Loneliness, Heaney's Wordsworth, the first comprehensive account of the influential relationship between the two poets, and another monograph on Sorley MacLean. Peter is co-editor of a great many collections, so I'm just going to quote a few: Modern Irish and Scottish Poetry with Edna Longley and Fran Brereton, which was published in 2011. Another collection with Niall Gallagher of essays on Scottish Gaelic and world literature, and a great many awards and prizes. So again, I'm just going to select one or two. Another anthology of Gaelic poetry, which you edited, Peter, in 2015 with Ian S. Macpherson. I'm sorry, I'm going to read the titles in English. 500 Years of Gaelic Love and Transgressive Verse, which was published in 2015 and which won the Donald Meek Prize for Gaelic Literature and the Salter Scottish Research Book of the Year. Peter's own poetry has been published widely across Scotland, the UK, and internationally. I discovered that you've been translated in a great many languages, among which Czech, Basque, German, Irish, but also Serbian, Slovakian, and Occitan, not too far from where I am at the moment. And you've been invited to read in, again, a great number of countries: Canada, Czechia, Germany, Ireland, Slovakia. I just want to say a few words of your own poetry collection before we start this interview, Peter. So your poetry collection, Galore, published in 2015, and another one entitled Some Kind Of, were shortlisted for the Saltire Scottish Poetry Book of the Year, and while Some Kind Of was also longlisted for the Highland Booker Prize. And finally, as I said at the beginning, you're also a broadcaster. Peter is a BBC Next Generation thinker, a frequent broadcaster on Radio 3 and other channels. So Peter, many thanks for accepting our invitation and welcome to this interview.
Thank you so much.
And I'd like to start with a question on your appointment as Scottish Makar. You're the first Makar who publishes poetry in Gaelic. So I was wondering, what does that mean in terms of expanding the field of Gaelic poetry? Do you find that your role helps? What sort of things are you invited to do as Makar that you think contributes to the greater awareness of Gaelic poetry, or maybe poetry in general? And as a sort of side issue, do you feel that this question, this distinction between Gaelic poetry in Scots or English, is actually valid?
Well, one of the actual things that require of me in the role is to try and encourage people to read and write poetry. So that's baked into it. So I get to celebrate poetry wherever I go now, which, depending on the audience, it's not always the easiest thing to do. I've done a couple of events with the poet Len Penny, where she always gets the people in the room to put their hands up if they like poetry, and it's very few usually. So then you have to win them over. I think it's great that all of the previous makers, Edwin Morgan, Jackie Kay, Liz Lockhead, and Kathleen Jamie, could write in different languages, and they all wrote in Scots as well as English. And
Yeah, true.
Eddie Morgan wrote in various languages, including some that he woke up. Obviously, I think it's fantastic that as a Gaelic speaker, I'm in a role. It just means that I get to speak Gaelic in rooms where it wouldn't otherwise be spoken. I get to introduce it into events, into schools where they might not have thought of it before, or dinners or formal occasions
Mm.
where it could be used in something that is not just a form of gloss or a form of icing, but actually this is somebody speaking in Gaelic as a normal and natural way of doing it. And given that we have the Scottish Languages Bill coming through the Scottish Parliament at the moment about to be ratified, I think it's a really good moment for that to
Mhm.
celebrate Gaelic as part of the fabric of Scottish cultural life. And as you suggest, to celebrate it alongside Scots. It's not a zero-sum game. I think if we are speaking Gaelic and Scots together, that's great. If we're speaking Gaelic, Scots, and English together, that's great. And so one of the things that I've been really happy to do at the book festival in Edinburgh, and I'm going to be doing in Stanza next year as well, is to bring poets together to respond to each other's poems.
Mm.
And this is poets who are based in Scotland, living in Scotland, but write in as many different languages as possible. So we had Scots, Gaelic, Laziale, Spanish, Macedonian in the event in the book festival, partly to show that Scotland is, like most countries, a multilingual one. And yeah, there are specific responsibilities that we have as a population to preserve, support, and encourage people to speak Gaelic and Scots. But this can be in conversation with lots of different languages.
Yeah, sure, sure. And do you find that you're successful when, when people start out saying that they don't like poetry at all, they like it better when, you start
Uh,
explaining what Gaelic poetry is all about?
it remains to be seen. If you tell them that poetry and song are very similar, then they're grudgingly accepted. If you tell them that poetry is a bit like a stand-up joke with no punchline, then they accept it as well. So there are different ways to get them to accept that the minute you start playing with language, you're writing a form of poetry.
And languages, as you were saying, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
at the same time. Different question. Can you tell us a little more about your activity as radio and TV producer? I mentioned that you're a trained broadcast journalist, news producer, having worked for the BBC. And one question that came to my mind when I was thinking about this was, how can you fit that into your schedule on top of everything else?
I can't really. And so it was I took a break from academia because I did a PhD, then I did a postdoc, and then I
Yeah,
worked for the BBC for 2.5 years, 3 years as a full-time member staff, and
yeah.
then as a freelancer. And so this means I was fully trained as a video journalist, broadcast journalist, and I did quite a bit of um, gallery production of the evening news program on BBC Alba in La.
Okay.
Um, and to be doing that full time, I couldn't really do that alongside an academic job. So it came to a point where I was going to have to choose which was the full-time job and which was the part-time job. And it so happened that I got a job at St. Andrews University, which meant that then I continued on journalism on a more freelance basis. And so
Okay.
as a talking head on BBC Radio and Gale, occasionally BBC Scotland, BBC Radio 3 and Radio 4, and also quite a bit of television work in Gaelic particularly. And because I knew how TV and radio worked, it was a little bit of a help for me when applying for the BBC Next Generation Thinker scheme. And it meant that I could talk relatively comfortably on camera, or at the very least, I didn't say and ah all the time, which was half the battle.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that you know a bit more than just, to say and but I see that. So you're still doing a bit of freelance journalism at the.
I do, and with the macro role, a bit less of that still. And so I
Okay.
would do occasional reviewing for print and for radio as well. But it tends to a lot has been slightly pushed to one side at the moment
Okay.
because
Yeah.
as the Macar, there are lots of invitations on top of the day job.
Yeah, sure, sure. And talk about the day job. You work as a lecturer at St. Andrews Universities, and I was curious about your teaching as
Mhm.
well. What you teach, what levels you teach, and how your teaching is part of how you relate your research, your teaching, and maybe your creative work. I'd be interested in how this all works out together.
And so, as happens at St. Andrews, I teach every level up from the first week of first year up to
Wow,
PhD students. And so, I give lectures on first and second year modules, I do tutorials on those modules, I run my own honours classes,
wow.
and then I contribute to master's and PhD teaching.
Mhm.
And because of, well, my background is partly in Irish literature and Scottish literature, I tend to teach that. So I teach
Okay, right.
modules of my own on what I call the country and the city in Scottish literature, which is Scottish literature from Burns to the present, more or
Well,
less. But trying to look at different ways to break it up. So introducing the country and the city simply as a way of fragmenting the nation into different ways. So there'll be different themes that arise. And the other module is one I teach on Celtic modernisms, which is looking at Irish and Scottish and some Welsh texts from about 1870 to 1939, partly looking at the interactions and to break down the national barriers between those texts in as many languages as I can. So there's Gaelic, Irish Gaelic, and and some Scots in there, though my Welsh is terrible, so I can't have
right.
any Welsh in there, unfortunately. In terms of creativity, one of the things I really like doing, I don't teach creative writing that much at the university, but I like getting my students to respond creatively to the text that they're reading. And so some of the assessments are creative assessments, so writing in the style of an author or inventing your own author from the period 1880 to 1939, and then writing the reviews of that author, writing the obituary of that author, and writing an academic essay about that author as well as some of the original material.
Okay, right.
I think in the age of AI, that might get a bit more complicated, but we'll see how that goes.
Oh, because you think that they might just give that prompt to the AI and let them.
I have faith in my students, but you never know.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. Okay, in the time we've got left, I'm really interested in your current research projects. Can you tell us more about it? You'll have to choose because you've got lots going on. So you'll
Uh,
have to choose which ones you really want to insist on with us.
I'm very lucky. I'm currently on 2 years of teaching. Partly that's 1 year paid by the University of St Andrews, that's 1 year paid by the Royal Society of Edinburgh. For the Royal Society of Edinburgh, I'm working on a collected poems of the 18th century Gaelic poet Alistair MacPherson. Alistair, fantastic poet, Jacobite, Catholic, Episcopalian, fought with Bonnie Prince Charlie's army, first author of a vocabulary and the first book of poems in Gaelic, rebellious, rabble-rousing body figure. So this
Wow.
is the big project. On top of that, I'm doing a collection of my own poems and a collection of non-literature, literary non-fiction essays.
Okay, right. And was this because I read that you're working on the RSC funded edition of the poems of Alistair
Yes, Alistair McVight at Alistair. So that's the
That's
main
the main
job,
one.
is it? Yeah.
Okay, right, okay. And about your third collection, your own poems, can you say a few things?
I hope
How
I
far
finish
along
it.
are you in the
Um, I'm not entirely sure, partly because I've got about three quarters, four-fifths of it.
Okay.
But many of the poems that I've had to write in the last year are commissions or for more formal occasions. So they're occasional poems. And I'm going to have to sit down and start sifting through to see if they can go into that collection or not, or if they sit alongside it. But I've got a rough benchmark of trying by March, April next year to have something almost finished.
Whoa, so we'll be looking forward to
Me
that.
too.
Also,
Yeah.
well, Peter, our 10 minutes are over already.
Yeah.
It's just such a short format, but very happy to have been talking to you and to have had your vision of Scottish literature and Gaelic literature and Gaelic poetry and how it all works out. So,
Thank you so much for the questions and for the invitation to talk.
oh, well,
I hope
thank
to catch
you.
up in person again soon.
Yeah, I hope so. And thank you for taking the time because I know that you're very busy. So thank you very much again, Peter. And
Thank you.
uh, I hope we'll be seeing this collection come out soon. Just going to